Yeah, so now that we know a little bit about what you guys do in your jobs, you know, we were all once students and we were all once in that position where we had to land that first job. So also, wanted to just ask you guys, how did you all started in the agency world, so how did you land that first job? Maybe we'll start with you, Rob, this time.
Yeah, for sure. So my first agency gig, so I knew when I was in university that I wanted to go into advertising, and I'm really glad that I did. And this is going back a while, so I'm dating myself, but back in 2000 I graduated university with a marketing degree and packed up all of my precious belongings into my 1986 Ford Taurus and drove from Saskatoon to Calgary like everybody else back in the day, and I think they still do for the most part. And I literally walked into every single agency in Calgary with my resume in hand saying, I want to work in advertising, I'll do anything, in any job that you have. Because I thought I wanted to be a copywriter at first, and then I got my first opportunity working at McLaren McCann, which is now called McCann. They dropped the McLaren part, working on the General Motors Good Wrench business way back in the day. And it was literally stuffing envelopes and doing all sorts of fun administrative work. And I quickly learned at that point too that I was not talented enough to be a copywriter. And so that was my first gig. I was sleeping on friends' couches until I got my very first low-paying job, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. How about yourself, Don?
2000, huh? That's when you go. I think I have shoes that are from 2000. You know, when I started bumping on agency doors, it would have been 1979, and so I was still in university in Toronto, and I'm from Edmonton, but I was going to school in Toronto. No booze on Edmonton, that's pretty good. Okay. And I wrote every agency a letter. Remember those things? Letters, stamps, and no emails then. And just kept saying, I don't want a job, but I do want to come and talk to you. And I got a lot of feedback from it. You know, good leaders of agencies will give you the time if they themselves truly care about growing the talent. And right off the top, said, this is not a job interview, I'm still going to school actually, but I want to learn about the agency business. So I talked to some people in Edmonton, at Hayhurst at the time. I think Calgary wasn't important then, so I didn't talk to anybody there. Just kidding. And then Toronto, when I went to university, I just started to meet them all the time and just kept banging on doors, and I've applied to a few, because my background's an account guy. So I was talking to a lot of client service sides as well, so the Proctors and the Nestle's of the world, and just trying to get in and learn strategy. And I remember one time I kept all the letters and I had 250 negative responses. And you just kept bugging, and everybody you met told me you just got to keep going because you're going to get hundreds and hundreds of people that say no. And it's almost a test. It's almost a test. You don't get it off the, if you get an agency job day one, you're very, very, very lucky. But it's almost a test of internal sort of strength if you keep going. So you got to just keep plugging away. And even I took a job in the research world in Toronto for a while, and I kept looking at the agency side. And one day a break came, and I was hired by an offshoot of J. Walter Thompson's agency called Enterprise Advertising. My first client was Labatt 50. And I worked with Alan Middleton was my boss, and Tony Altillia, guys who've run downtown the DDB and a lot of great agencies, and learned good things from them. But it took, 6 years of heavy slugging. But once you're in it was great. So that's how.
That's great. How about yourself, Raul?
I'm trying to think of how to start this. I was a huge nerd for advertising when I was in school. I knew everybody's work. I knew their names. I knew the creative directors. I didn't know what any of them looked like. I memorized all the annuals. I even backlogged all the archives I could find at World's Biggest Bookstore. I was like the nerdiest nerd about advertising. I wanted it so bad. Also, I went to a school that wasn't known for advertising, for the graphic and advertising design side of it from Humber. We were known for the copywriting program. So I knew I had to work extra hard. So my friend who also went to George Brown, we knew we were up against the 90 people who were graduating from in our classes, plus the however many were graduating from OCAD at the time, Academy of Design, Sheridan, like we thought we had like a 1% chance of getting a job.
There was no Miami at school.
Yes. So at the time, we stealthily went around to all those schools, to their open houses, just to see where they were at, to see and compare with ourselves of how much harder we had to work. And I was telling Stephen earlier that the year I came out was one of the toughest years. The talent level was insane. And just going to any of these portfolio shows where you're looking for other people's work, we use that as an opportunity to judge ourselves on how much more we had to do. So we left super bummed out, but super inspired to redo our portfolios over and over and over again. So I kind of had an idea of how advertising worked. And at some point, our coordinator entered any of the good students' work into Applied Arts Spectacular Students issue. And at that time, that was the only thing going for any student. So everybody else was kind of doing their internships. I did an internship at an agency I never even asked for. They offered me a job, and I did the worst thing I could ever do. I turned them down, and I told them that this isn't about this place. It's just I never even tried. It was handed to me. I need to know for myself if I was good enough. Of the aspirations that I have in advertising, that if I took this job, would I be the person that I set out to be, that I was inspired by all this work? So I turned them down. I waited till November. All my friends got jobs. They did their internships. They all got hired at places, that legitimate places, or some of them were just jobs. Then November came, and then that issue came out, and then I just started getting calls, which I was like, thank God this worked out, because my mom was going to kill me because I lived at home. I was working at Taco Bell. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, so then I actually got calls, and I went, and I was like so close at the time. Palmer Jarvis, do you guys know what Palmer Jarvis is? Yeah. So Palmer Jarvis called me, and I almost like had a heart attack, that I was like, oh my God, I'm one of the agencies that I basically, can I say this, masturbated to their work. I would have like, I just said it, sorry, you delete that from the podcast. So yeah, they called me, and then they wanted to hire me, bring me on as the intern. But then this is the Toronto office, not the Vancouver office, and the leader there, Mark Stoiber, said, "Hey, I'm going to call you in 2 months. I can't tell you why." And he went over to Gray, and he hired me and my good friend Chad Kubikting, who we worked on our portfolios together as partners. So it ended up working out really well, because it was a turnaround shop, and as a junior coming in, a turnaround shop is probably the best thing you can do, because you're going to touch everything. The end.
Steven?
Okay, so I remember when I graduated from OCAD, I remember I started the interview process. So I'm meeting as many people as I can, and I got a job offer at my 4th interview with this agency. But I just, it was like, oh wow, that's great, but I just didn't feel it. Like my gut wasn't saying this is the place to go, so then I said no, and then I had 51 interviews after that, meeting people for 8 months, looking for a job. And, a lot of times you meet somebody, they go, yeah, well maybe, come back again, come back later, come back, or follow up. So I was waiting for I was kind of listening to my gut, and I wanted to go to a place that had a mentor. So then there was a guy that was working at an agency called Bozell Palmer Bonner, and it was doing this black label work in Toronto, and at the time it was a game changer, and I really liked the creative director. So I called him up and said, hi, it's Stephen Jurisic, and I'd like to work for you, blah, blah, blah. Left a message. He calls me back. No creative director calls you back. Just one thing, they'll never call you back. And he goes, Steve Jurisic, I thought your name is Steve Surgic. Aren't you a director? And I go, no, and there is a director named Steve Surgic. Oh, well actually we're looking for an art director. Well actually we're looking for somebody to do renderings for our storyboards. Can you draw? And I was like, fuck. And I can draw. I wanted to be a comic book artist back in the day. So I was like, oh, yeah, okay. So I came in, showed him the drawings. He got me in. I started drawing and helping do his renderings and stuff like that. And I slowly brought in a friend of mine who could draw better than me, and started delegating to him. And then I started doing the advertising, and then I got the job. But then I got the mentor. So I was really happy. So persevere and go with your gut.
That's great. I think I think pretty much everyone who works in advertising who had any length of career has an interesting story about how they got their first job. So if there's students out there, keep going. So now that we know a little bit about the early parts of your career, wanted to go back to the topic that we're talking about today, of future-proofing your career, and wanted to ask you guys, when was the first time you guys really noticed a shift happening in the industry that you had to adapt to? You guys kind of have come up through various eras, so those shifts may be different. So maybe let's start with, you want to go, Raul? Go out of order this time?
I think for me, the biggest shift, I'm trying to think of how to make this not so long-winded, was when, I don't know if you guys know, but most digital agencies that are attached to an agency started out as a DM department. And for the longest time, the traditional agency was just like, whatever, it's just digital. It's just the DM thing, and kind of turned a blind eye to it. And then digital became more than just the idea of what digital could be, changed. And then the people who were in the traditional side either had to adapt or ignore it. And I think the people who adapted did really well. And I think for a time there people were calling them the unicorns, the big ideas who could be media agnostic, digital, whatever. And then now, I think, not to plug momentum, but it's happening again. There's another kind of look at, that's just digital social, that's influencers, that's not really big idea thinking, that's not traditional thoughts. And those people who have the mentality towards that, and experientially, I said it before, attend events, if you look at that stuff as that, and you don't adapt and evolve, then again, it's another split. It's another expertise that you have to continually to grow and become and be smarter about. Or for creatives, it's such an age-defining, career, that if you're not on top of everything, you're going to be left in the dust.
Yeah. How about Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll kick off by saying our industry is changing at a pace like we've never seen before, with technology, with data. I can't think of a business discipline that actually is changing more. You think about accounting and finance and HR. I mean, those things are fairly standard and pretty status quo, which is why marketing is really great. But at the same time, man, it's just evolving at a pace that makes it challenging to keep up. And I think about my career. Starting back again to 2000, there was, email marketing was a big thing, and building these really flash-intensive websites was then a big thing, and programmatic display buying was a big thing, and now it's all about artificial intelligence and virtual reality and augmented reality, and the list goes on, and who knows what's going to be next. But I mean, the big shift for me, I think, and what a lot of brands are struggling with, ourselves included, quite honestly, is the importance of mobile. And when you think about the device and how often we use it, and our ability as marketers to connect with people with something that is physically with them 24/7, and brands just aren't doing it very well right now. And it's something that we all need to be doing a better job at. There's new technologies emerging that are supporting that. Platforms like Facebook and Snap and Twitter and others are making that easier. But I think that's been a really influential technology shift, that it's not the latest one per se, but it's one that we just still need to be thinking about all the time, just because of how important that device is. And I see a lot of you guys in the room, you're on it, right? I'm on mine 24/7. There's some crazy stat about how many times you check your phone a day. It's in the thousands, and we just need to be doing a better job of that as marketing professionals.
Yeah. Don?
Okay. Many have been mentioned, all game changers, digital, data. The biggest for me was the shift when the account service person lost control of the strategy. And this technology, this philosophy that came out of Britain called account planning came in. And this was around sort of 1986. And Gray London invented the account planning model. And that's when a lot of people with psychology backgrounds and everything else sort of came in and said, we're going to take over the strategy. And the agency world, as far as I'm concerned, lost it right then. Because the account person, historically, even beyond Mad Men, knew the strategy, wrote the strategy, worked with the creative teams, and they all wrote the stuff together, but they knew the client's business intimately. They knew as much about the client's business as the client did. And that's a great overview saying it, right? That if you're an account person and you need to know as much about the client's business, their sales, their trends, as the client does. And I would ask, probably most account people today know this much about the client's business. So how often is that client going to pick up the phone outside of advertising or marketing or anything and ask you about their business? So up until '84, that's what happened. The account person would go out, and now there was Mad Men days, and you drink and talk, but you talk about their business. You wouldn't talk necessarily about the ad or the event or the promotion. You talk about their business, and that would then lead to a better understanding of how you wanted to promote it, push it, whatever it was. But you knew you were a true partner with them. Account planning came in, and there's some great account planners, and we're just some wonderful account planners, and they just focus on the strategy side, the consumer side, which is critical. But many account planners don't know the client, don't really know the business, don't know the understanding, don't know how the product's shipped, haven't been on the floor, haven't drank, haven't talked to the bottler, whatever it was. So when the account group lost that, and we became bag carriers, which is the biggest insult you can call an account person, a lot of pride was lost. And I think agencies lost right then, and here we sit today with the Accentures of the world and the Deloittes of the world, and what are they winning on? They're winning on strategy, understanding the business relationship of the clients. And now you got the agencies running like mad to open up their own goddamn consulting firms. Well, we'll try and steal that back from them. So that's the biggest change that happened. And to me, it was a big sea change, and when agencies started to lose control of that relationship with the client. We used to have a seat at the boardroom, as they say. Agencies, companies used to sit at the boardroom table when huge decisions were being made. I would think probably no agencies now sitting at the boardroom table. Very few. So that was the biggest change for me.
That's great. How about yourself, Stephen?
Well, everybody's, they've kind of nailed it. I think from my point of view at John Street, so we opened in 2001, and then that 10 years, every digital company started to come, everybody. And we were like, oh God, what do we do? Do we buy a digital company? Or do we do this? Do we do that? Because just to be relevant. But I think we were lucky to start then, because then all we did was just train within. And the president of the company had a healthy dose of insecurity. And I think what that did was made him just keep looking at how we could train up. So we brought in people. We always had strategy at the core of our culture. And as long as we were just always training, and I know it sounds like you hear that all the time, a lot of companies don't train. They do not train. They do not bring in experts and train them up. They bring in senior people, and hopefully they will trickle down into the culture. We were bringing in juniors and intermediates and senior people to infiltrate the culture. And young creative people that just seem very savvy in sort of the digital space. Strategists that were already thinking strategy. So this insecurity was always there versus being overconfident, being underconfident, but always looking at what we need to do to be better. So I think that was one thing that we just kept doing, and still seems to be working, even though I'm not there anymore. Okay.
That's great. I actually wanted to ask you another question about John Street. So you went from working for other people to co-founding your own business in the context of future-proofing your own career. Basically, no longer being at the mercy of other companies making the decisions, but being that decision maker. Did you feel that it was an important step to start your own company in that way?
Well, I mean, you can talk to a lot of entrepreneurs or people that started their own companies. So Angus and I and Arthur were, he was my partner, copywriter. Arthur was the president. We were working for Amirati Puris, great agency in Canada, was doing very well. But we weren't really having, we weren't having fun. Angus and I were managers now. We weren't mentors. The people that we were working with, we were now their boss. We were promoted to creative directors, and that wasn't interesting. I wasn't learning how to be a creative director. And one guy approached us and sort of said, would you guys be interested in starting your own thing? And okay, well, it's pretty scary. Arthur has 3 kids. One is autistic. Angus has 2 kids, and one was about to come. And I didn't have the kids, so it's like, hey, what's the worst that could happen? That's what we asked each other. And the worst that could happen is we go do it, it fails, we go back and get hopefully good jobs. We had good careers. But the upside is, let's just go for it. So it was just that. Yes, we did have somebody that was supporting us. We did all have to take a salary cut. We did all have to sort of suck it up a little bit. But with the idea of growth, it was really, fun, and I think if you can, and if your gut says you can, why not? And we were young enough still, but I still look at Arthur, with this autistic daughter, and he'll for the rest of his life have to have an extra $150,000 just to handle her. And he said, let's do this. And I think Angus and I were like, fuck, okay. If he does, then we gotta go.
That's great. So question for you, Rob. Moving from agency side to client side, how do you think, how do you think working in the agency side and understanding the agency process helped you, become a better, more well-informed client?
Yeah, I think that actually helped me in both of my client-side roles land those jobs, was having agency experience on my resume. And even in Calgary, which is, compared to other big markets like New York or Toronto, it's not considered a hub per se, but I think it's full of incredibly talented people. But just understanding the how work gets done, how where great ideas come from, how to motivate teams to get work pushed through the system. And actually, we were joking earlier, because we both have agency side as part of our careers before we went client side, and you can either be one of 2 things when you have that. You can be a really great client or a miserable client. And I like to think that I'm the former. And it's because you know just how to motivate, and you know how to inspire, and you know how to get the best work possible, because at the end of the day, your agency is there to make you look good. It's there to make your business look good, your boss therefore look good. And the more that you can encourage them, support them, the better, versus being the other side, which is over demanding and just have unrealistic expectations. And so I think it was a really valuable 13 years that I had that's really helped me build really good relationships with agency partners in Calgary and Toronto and New York and other places. So yeah, it's really, really good.
That's awesome. Don, I got a question for you. So, similarly, coming from an agency background to a client-side background, now that we're seeing more companies creating in-house creative departments, would you recommend, do you think that's a good place for someone to start their career? I guess it depends on what their goal is, but...
No, they should always start in an agency like Wax and work their way up. I think it is... what's happening with in-house studios, because of primarily social, is that the ability to move fast and have a good understanding of what that client wants. It's hard sometimes to ask an agency to 24/7 be on and know every little answer. So some clients have larger in-house studios than others. We have a tinier one, a lot for just in-house graphic work, and we depend on Wax a lot for a lot of our work. But we do some in-house. We do some for our social. And I would say if you're a creative person, you get a job where you can. If that starts you, if that gets you an experience to work on the tools and some really cool machinery, if you're doing digital work or not, that's great. And get a start, and then leverage. If you really want to get in the agency side, then you leverage that. You build on your resume and say, I know how to do that. I worked with clients internally. I understand the politics. So I think you do. If you really want it, you get in any way you can. If that means you start within the in-house of a client, then you do that. If there's no other opportunity, but it's not. I don't think it's a step down at all. But it's a way in, and it may not be a bad way in, because it's growing and growing, and clients are doing different things, and it may get you into that agency you're partnering with, and you talk to them, and the lunch leads to a lunch. Next thing you know, you get a chance to work with that agency. So I wouldn't turn my nose up at it at all.
Yeah. So Raul, the next question's for you. You know, you're someone who has spent a few years of your career as a freelancer by choice, right? I think that's an important.
Sort of by choice.
Yeah.
I just to elaborate on that, you work so hard in your career to make a name for yourself, to have a good reputation, and then things out of your control happen, like Target leaving Canada, and your agency has to get rid of 46 people, and they evaluate you on the return on investment, or what they can do of keeping juniors, or do they keep one person? Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's a business. It's like NBA, where they're like, I got traded, oh, DeMar DeRozan, I'm so sad. But it's a business, right? You gotta do what's best for your business.
Yeah, so
that's what I tell myself when I go home and cry on my pillow.
Talk to him later about it.
Like, Asian guy drinking at the bar.
So, I mean, as a freelancer, you've had a lot of success as a freelancer. You know, I've never heard of another freelancer who's won like 5 Lions as a freelancer. You know what I mean? How do you think being a freelancer has actually future-proofed your career? You know, going back to the topic of this event.
Outside of Miami Ad School, because Miami Ad School honestly is doing it well. The reason why that happened is the state of schools currently. So when I came up, the freelancers were brought in to work on all of the shitty work, to free up the full-timers to work on all of the best work. When I went freelance, I was surprised that they were calling us in and handing over their best briefs. They were like, here you go. We don't know if anyone here can crack this brief. And I was like, you're giving me this brief? Are you kidding me? And they're like, oh, here's another brief. And I'm like, oh my God, this is another great brief. The difference being is that when I was coming up out of, with my portfolio, I was saying this earlier too, that my portfolio was 30 pages long. A campaign of 3 considered as 1, and you had to show 10 pieces in your book. So I showed 10 pieces that I can do big idea thinking that carried out basically through print, but could also be TV or whatever else. Now people are getting hired with like, hey, here's a digital thing, and that's 1 piece. Hey, here's an out-of-home thing, that's another piece. But there's no more big idea stress on people. So you have a department filled with juniors that are of that mindset, that when I came in, like, here you go. And I think it's a trend for a lot of freelancers, that a lot of them are going freelance because of quality of life, but because of that. And like Nick and I freelance together, and our goal was when it can. Like, we just sat there thinking of stuff of like, hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? And then
it's really the craziest job we've ever had.
Then I went to New York, and I worked directly with the global CCO and the North American CCO, and they're like, here's our briefs across the network when it can. And I was like, what? So I was working with a team in Brazil and like the global strategist. It was just like the most insane thing I honestly can't believe it happened. I sort of forgot your question because I rambled on. Freelance was great.
Sweet. Well,
creative guy. Forgot the point.
No, I mean it actually did answer the question I wanted to get at. Just the idea of freelancing, and it's kind of no longer a bad word, right? It's about just getting the best opportunities and having that work-life balance. So next question is actually for Rob. As someone who's worked their entire career in Calgary, we're all here in Calgary. Everyone here is hoping to get a job in Calgary or already has one working within this industry. What do you think are the opportunities that are available to someone in Calgary? Like, what is Calgary good at offering someone starting out?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think number one, it has really great and talented agencies. I should know I've worked for most of them. Not Wax though, yet, so. And I think what it allows you to do, and this is my perspective of someone that spent 13 years agency side in Calgary, and I'll probably defer to my colleagues here in terms of whether or not this is factual, but having worked a lot with Toronto-based agencies and big agencies, and even your agencies out of New York, TBWA, for example, which is massive, I think what it allows you to do when you're early on in your career, you get to do things that you probably wouldn't get the opportunity to do when you're working for a 400-person agency, say, for example. you're given way more responsibility, you're given way more opportunity to actually tackle big projects, get valuable face time with clients, and take on probably more responsibility, more accountability earlier than you would if you were, say, working at a large agency where you're deemed as a junior and you're kind of given the crappier assignments and whatnot. And so I think that was really helpful for me. I mean, you have to work for it, obviously, and you have to deliver at the end of the day. But that was one thing I really found about spending that 13 years here in this marketplace, working with really great agencies, working with really great mentors on some really exciting work as well. But just the ability to do stuff, in my mid-20s that you probably wouldn't get that same opportunity if you were in a bigger market, was really beneficial for me and certainly has been helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've had the same experience starting my career in Calgary, being from Toronto, and telling my friends, are like, what are you working on? And I'm like, I'm working on a TV project, and they're like, what? We're still writing coupons, So I wanted to talk to you other three. You guys have all made moves in your career in terms of relocating. Maybe want to start with you, Stephen, as someone who grew up in Calgary and ended up in Toronto. Were there certain things you saw that were available to you in Toronto that you wouldn't necessarily be able to get in terms of where you wanted to be in your career in Calgary?
I kind of ran away a little. I went to Alberta College of Art, and I was right out of high school, and I just wasn't ready. I think I wanted to party, and I wanted to be a ski bum, and I worked a little bit, and I didn't realize how hard art college is. So I did. I gave up, and then I went and became a ski bum. And then I did that, got that out of my system, and then came back to Calgary and went, okay, what now? And I went, oh fuck, I can't go back to ACAD. I'm embarrassed. So I kind of ran to Ontario, and I knew that Ontario College of Art was there. So, and it wasn't like Toronto was a better market. It's funny, and even when I've been in Toronto for many years, I always talk to my buddies here, and I came back here all the time to ski and hang out, and I've always thought, I'll come back, because it is a maverick city, things get done here, and a lot of great creative people have come through Calgary. And I think what happened was, it was a little bit of an escape, a little bit of just try something, and maybe I'll come back. I think initially I thought I would go and come back. And then, life happens, you meet people, you have a good experience, and things seem to go my way, so I just stuck with it.
That's really interesting. Raul, you moved to LA a couple years ago to take on the role of creative director at David and Goliath. As someone who has had a lot of success in Canada, did you feel like moving there that you had to kind of reestablish yourself? Did it kind of feel like in a way you were starting from scratch, or how was that experience for you?
I was really intimidated by the American market in general. I'd built up in my mind that everyone in the States is amazing. That came crashing down very fast. I hope no one's watching this podcast, if this podcast is going. Not that agency, but another agency that kind of is sort of like that. No, honestly, the difference between coming up in Canada and the States is that you get to learn everything. And in the States, they're so siloed. So I had one of the CCOs say, I really need a good TV team. And I'm like, what? What's a TV team? Right? Like, they just do TV, they don't know how to do print, they don't know what is this? And very quickly I realized, like, they were like, oh, you know how to do digital? Oh, you know how to see a full-blown desktop website from the beginning to the very end, sell it to a client and explain it in a way that they can understand? Like, oh, you know how to do like stunts and just social, or just anything that wasn't just a TV spot, and it blew their mind. So what I realized was that very quickly, if you put the time in and you're really a student of the game, it doesn't really matter where you work because you'll be successful. And I think the perception of the States is always better. They got bigger budgets. They don't know what to do with their budgets. A lot of it started with, and I said this earlier, it's like, what can we do with Lady Gaga? And I'm like, what? What is this idea? Like, what is the insight? Why are we even using her? And they're like, what are you talking about? It's Lady Gaga. And we're going to get this director to do it, and it's going to be amazing. And I'm like, where do I even start? I don't even know what to do with this. So even just me coming up with concepts that started with an insight, and here's like what the idea is called, and here's how it comes to life, and it like blew their mind. They're like, "Did you do this with a strategist? Like, who do you work with on this?" And I was like, "This is just par for the course from being in Canada." So yeah, it's as far as reestablishing myself, it kind of happened on its own. That the market itself is just so much money that they don't know what to do with it. So people just kind of get segmented and just don't try beyond what they're asked for. So.
I mean, the Canadian market is pretty incredible. If you look at Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, I mean, if you can do what we do here, and then if you go to the States, you're like a genius in their minds, because you handle so much with less money, more smart thinking, more central smart ideas like Raul was talking about, and then build out, versus there it's just sometimes pure scale. So, and I think that's probably what this market does a lot for people. You don't have as big a budget. And I think sometimes when I was a young creative guy, I like not having the budget and just trying to crack it with limitations in a way, because then you have to be smarter.
Yeah, I think that's important for everyone to hear, because I feel like, you know, every small city has an inferiority complex versus the next big thing. You know, Calgary has an inferiority complex to Toronto, which has an inferiority complex to New York, and you know, it's really important to realize that just because we work in a smaller market doesn't mean we can't do work on the same scale that's recognized internationally. Don, you've made maybe the most dramatic move in terms of geography. Moving to China. Just wanted to ask a little bit about how that experience came about. You know, how was it, and when you decided to make that move, what were you trying? Like, what was there a trend that you were trying to, you know, anticipate? Just want to hear a little bit about that experience.
Well, I ended my 12 years in Asia in China, but I started my 12 years in Asia in Bangkok. So I like I said, I started my agency career in Toronto, working with big agencies and big brands, running Molson, running Labatt Blue, Coors Light, Export, a lot of big work. And that's when Canadian brands, that's where there was an advantage to working in Toronto, because those brands had budgets. There's very few Canadian brands, maybe WestJet's got one, that have money left, that's work being done here. So much of the work is now being done south of the border, from the multinationals anyways. But when I was working at Scally and we were doing all the blue work, we were spending money beyond money. It was just ridiculous, traveling the world. For Coors Light, we were shooting every winter, we were shooting in New Zealand because it looked like Canada. And so when we moved the brand to the whole mountain positioning and sort of 93, all that footage was shot in New Zealand, and our creative guys were spending 2 months a year in New Zealand. I mean, the money was ridiculous, and so it was great to work there because they had the money. But then it didn't matter. So now it's about the idea, and that idea can happen in Calgary, Entwistle, New York, Santiago. It doesn't matter if it's a good idea. We have disciplines and tools, thank you Internet, to get those ideas around. So I was at FCB, running the Molson business, and I got headhunted to go run the Coca-Cola business in Southeast and West Asia, based out of Bangkok. I didn't even know where Thailand was. I thought it was Taiwan in the first place. So I went on an interview in Bangkok. So I spent 3 years running the Coca-Cola business for all of Southeast and West Asia. So from India, Pakistan, all the way down to Vietnam and Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore. It's pretty cool countries. And then I moved to Singapore, still with McCann, and ran the multinational business for Coca-Cola and General Motors, UPS, MasterCard, all of our clients out of that office. Spent 3 years there. Then moved to Sydney, Australia, and spent 3 years there with McCann. And I was doing a World Group role then. If you know McCann World Group, there's the agency, Momentum, MRM, Weber Shandwick, and I was doing a global business development role. So working with all the McCann World Group companies, pitching global business for Asia Pacific, and I was doing that out of Sydney, all account side, and sort of pulling it all together. And then went to China to run the China operations of McCann, so Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou. And the China move, so all those moves were I was done with Toronto. So I was actually thought I was going to move to Vancouver, but I'd done enough time in Toronto. I was a Western kid and kind of thought, hey, the Vancouver seems pretty cool. And this opportunity came to go, and I jumped at it. But I will echo everything. As a Canadian kid, you think, we can't be that good. But wherever I worked in the world, the Canadian talent that I came across from other parts of the world were outstanding. And we are respected around the world as good thinkers, good creative talent, good media talent. And I think a lot of it comes from just the openness, and that we do work on a lot of things. We take an idea and we can execute it through everything. We're not TV shops or digital shops or execution shops or experiential shops. So you can really export that outside Canada quite easily. And the biggest thing is because we're friggin' Canadians. And we get along with people. I've worked, again, hello America, or whoever else, Aussies, Brits, they don't mingle all that well sometimes. And if you're working in a multinational environment, the Canadian brand goes a long way. Peacekeepers, whatever it is, right? We're really diplomats, and maybe it's the British heritage when it comes to advertising, and we're a lot more, I think, we're much more European in our approach to advertising than I think we are American, is my reading, everybody I've worked with. And every client, my agency was an American agency, so I saw a lot of Americana.
That's great. That's really interesting. I think I got your bio very wrong. I said you worked in China, but yeah, I got China right at least. We've spoken a lot about the steps you take to personally future-proof your career. Part of future-proofing your career is ensuring that you're good at what you do at your job. So I just want to talk a little bit about how you apply those same things to your career. So maybe I'll start with you, Rob. In terms of, there's a lot of innovation going on in the airline advertising. There's a lot of, new technologies affect the ways that people book flights, and a ton of people aren't looking for the flights in the newspaper anymore.
We were?
What?
What?
So yeah, just wondering. How do you, as someone in a leadership position at WestJet, how do you kind of stay ahead of that curve?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I mean, as I said earlier, our industry, our discipline as marketing people in this room, I mean, it's just changing so rapidly and so quickly, it's sometimes hard to keep up with things. But speaking on behalf of WestJet, we operate in a highly commoditized industry. Right, we're flying a metal tube at 35,000 feet at 500 miles an hour. And the other guys across the street are doing the exact same thing, usually with the exact same airplane and what have you. And it's also an incredibly volatile industry where we operate in really low margin environments where if there's a hike in fuel costs, we hit it from a bottom line perspective, and then ultimately our guests face that as well. But when it comes to what we're doing, I mean, technology is a main focal point of us as we become a global airline. And for those that don't know, we're currently in a really cool transformation period of becoming a Canadian full network carrier to a global carrier. And our CEO has actually been recently quoted in saying, we want to become a tech company that flies airplanes, not the other way around. But more so from a brand perspective, I'll put my brand hat on. In order to differentiate yourself in a highly commoditized industry, it's actually pretty difficult to do. But one thing that we have built up a lot of credibility on over the years is this notion of care and creating remarkable experiences. And so as we transform the business and premiumize the business and add things like lounges and business class with lie-flat beds and things like that, for us it's going to be leveraging obviously technology for sure, but from a brand perspective, really lean hard into those key differentiators that have been so valuable for the brand in building success over the last 22 years in an environment where 95% of airlines fail after 7. And so that's going to be a big one for us going forward.
That's great. Don, going to ask you a similar question, but in the financial world, when there's a lot of innovation going on, all the big banks and a lot of your competitors, and including new startup fintechs and stuff like that, given that Servus is a credit union, you know, which means something. How do you keep the brand kind of ahead of the curve in terms of marketing?
Yeah, no, it's a real competitive business, as our friend here from John Street would know, and launching a pain in the ass competitor called Tangerine. And having, like I said, a pain in the ass Alberta-owned bank, which blows my mind anyway. It's called ATB. Alberta's like no other market. There's only one other market in North America that has a government bank, and that's North Dakota Bank. I mean, you got to understand how rare it is to have an ATB in your midst, because nobody else faces this in the banking world. So it's a scenario again of differentiation. It's all about differentiation. And if you're choosing a company to work at, and they don't have a differentiator, and you have the ability to move on. Because if you have nothing to differentiate against, and you're just going to play the price game, or we're just going to say we're going to do better ads than they will, that'll get you so far. But eventually they're going to go, so what the fuck what makes you different? Why are we here? So in the banking world, and in the marketing part of the banking world, it's a combination. I got 2 players from my team here, Kristen and Chris, who work in my department. And the exciting thing about it is, with all the change that's going on in technology, which is blowing our minds, that exact amount of change is going on in the banking world because of fintechs and digital-only plays and Bitcoin and you name it. So you put the two together, and every day it's a friggin' adventure of what's going to be next. So how do you differentiate a brand in that scenario? Credit unions are different. We are different, especially Servus, because we're all about, we pay you money back in loyalty. It's not cinema tickets, it's not points, it's actual cash for the more business you do with us. We'll give it back to you. No one else does that. It's an ultimate reward, so that's what we are going to continue to hang our hat on. We're great at service and blah, 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 so is everybody else. And they can throw a lot more money at than we can, but our big differentiator, which no one else does, is that we're incredibly loyal to us. You're loyal to us, we'll be loyal to you, we'll give you money back. Real money to put in your pocket. So that's a differentiator that we push, we'll continue to push it more and more, but the way we drive it is, and the way the mentality is inside, is we think of ourselves as a challenger brand. And we challenge, and I need to have an enemy to have a passion, and my enemy is ATV. Did you sense that? I'm sure they're nice people and all, but I hate them, because I have to hate them, because that's who we go after. I mean, I don't love the banks either, but that's a bridge too far right now. There's a few that I can grab, but the Royal Banks and the TVs they're doing nice work, and so I don't hate them as much. But I love the challenger brand mentality. And I know WestJet for a while played that game. I don't know if you still are. Okay. And there's many different ways to be a challenger. And when I worked at McCann, I was on the other side. I always looked at Pepsi and go, you guys got it easy because you just take pot shots at Coke. It's hard to keep, if you're a leader, to keep pushing. You can do certain things, but challenger brands can have a lot of fun. Just like with Pepsi, and when I was MasterCard, we were a challenger brand to Visa, but most of the time when I was a GM, and Intel and all the others, we were the leader. But the challengers had a lot of fun. And so that's the way we drive Servus, is a challenger brand mentality, is to always try and do something a little different. We introduced the circle versus the square. As the challenger, we're different. Everybody else's squares, we're about a circle, and that's where we're going to go, and we'll do more and more with it. But to visually show ourselves as well that we are a challenger, that the brand itself is different from what we like to think is everybody else being a square, especially ATV. Am I clear? ATV? Okay. Is anybody back at ATV here? Come over and talk to us. Come and talk to us. And fly WestJet while you're at it.
Great. Just a couple more quick questions before we open up to the floor. Raul, as someone in a position as executive creative director of an agency, how do you ensure that the people that work in your creative department are future-proofing their career? You know what I mean? Like how they're not looking at you and being like, if Raul wasn't here, I'd be advancing my career. Is there anything? Do you think about that?
Well, I try and whoever works with me, no matter where they work or whoever they are, my biggest goal for them is to So let me rewind this for a second. There's been like 3 real big influences on my career. When I worked at under Christy Pilson and Grace at Rethink, I went there and I was like, oh, I was ranked in strategy. I'm going to Rethink. I'm going to tear it up there. I got there and I was surrounded by a department where everyone was ranked. I was like, no joke, I was like ranked 19 that year. They were like number 1, 2, 6, 8, 15, 22. Instead of being a person where like, I'm going to show these guys I'm the best, like I'm just as good at them, I'm going to like work so hard, not show anyone any of my work, I realized, let me take this opportunity to learn from these guys so that I can become a better creative. And that's what that department was at that specific time. We talk about it was the golden age of Rethink. So I'm like, Rob Terry, you're #1 writer, one of the best copywriters for comedy. I'm like, well, what's your secret? So as a creative in general, I just suggest to you, if you have great people in your work, like use them as your tools, learn from them. So for me as a creative, I relearned how to be a creative there. I learned how to not have an ego. And then Brent Choi was one of the creative directors who actually taught me how to manage. He showed me how to be a leader, what was expected of me, and he kept us accountable for stuff. And up until that point, I think creatives have a hard time managing because for the longest time, they're just, you're creative, you should be able to manage, anyways, go. So Brent was that guy for me. So from that point on, going forward, I realized you're going to win as many awards as you can. At some point, it won't make a difference between you and the next person. It might come down to taste. But your best calling card going forward is that you become that person for someone else. So I try to be that person with every single person. I think everyone who's worked for me, even if they're at another agency, we still keep in touch. I still try and keep that mentorship up. Warning, here's a plug. I was actually the mentor of Ad Age's Creative of the Year this year, Just Toy.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm in the interview, so yeah. So if you check Ad Age, but my suggestion for the department underneath you is that help them achieve their goals instead of it being what can they do for us. It's more of changing the mindset of what can I do for these people so that they can grow and achieve their goals under me, so they want to be here. And I think that was the difference of what Brent showed me, was that he took an investment in my career for me to grow, and because of that, I was ready to go to war for this guy. Like he wanted me to work on the weekend, no problem, because I was learning so much. He was taking us aside after every client presentation and going, hey, that was great, but the way that you say certain things, it sounds like you're saying it like a question at the end, so it doesn't sound like it's a confident statement. So I'd be like, hey, so I think this is good. And it shows weakness when you're trying to present, right? They're like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So as far as future-proofing, it's like put them ahead of what they're going to do for you, because what you do for them is going to surpass anything that happens.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Raul. One last question before we open it up to Stephen. Going back to Miami Ad School and what you offer your students. I've seen portfolios come out of other schools than Miami Ad School, and it seems to be like this sometimes a huge discrepancy of quality. And just wanted to,
in a good way.
Yeah, in a good way. And just wanted to see, what do you think you guys are doing right in terms of preparing students for not just today's industry, but what is to come?
Well, I mean, again, like I talked about earlier, I think you have to keep on top of what the industry needs. So I think when we look at our curriculum, and we even still think we're behind because it's moving, as we've all talked, at mega speed, but we're setting them up so that they have all the tools. So, I'll plug some of the programs, but we're teaching them user experience, we're teaching them strategy, we're teaching them business, how to understand business, how to talk KPIs. We're teaching them social media, but not just how to be creative in social media, how to channel plan in social media. So then when they come in, they're not just, oh, this is a cool thing on Instagram. You go, well, why are you doing it there? So, and I think we just keep rechecking that. And then I think the teachers, I'm trying to get Raul to teach there. And if you were in Toronto, I'd get you to teach there. So we have a lot of professional teachers that are the best in the class, best in class in Toronto. And we have people that come in out of market from the Miami Ad School International that come up and speak and do hero talks. So it's kind of always getting the right people teaching, people that are doing the best work teaching. And I think it goes back to a little bit when I was at John Street. I think I look at, and I think Raul just said it, you hire these great people and you kind of have to get out of their way a little bit, let them shine, but always have their back, always, and then if you would encourage sort of teamwork amongst mentors. I find what's really inspiring to Aman, Manit, and I at the school is when you see students learning from other students. And that's, pretty interesting because they may be too shy to talk to me or a teacher, but they're learning from each other. So is that enough?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So as promised, we're going to have some Q&A from the audience. So if anybody has a question, feel free to put up your hand and I'll come bring the microphone over to you. There's a question. Could you introduce yourself and say your name and where you work?
You know me, I'm Jay from Wax.
He's planted.
Just like not really, I already gave my question. So, it's funny that Canadians are generalists, our versatility is our strength. I've certainly seen that. I've worked in the New York market a bit. However, what I've noticed since the 90s anyway is the stresses that junior staff face working at agencies with budgets being so low. Account people, it's amazing what they do these days. I mean, they're doing CMS updates, they're doing code, they're writing social updates, they're kind of crossing into creative, crossing into strategy, project management, production management. They need to know every single tactic out there. And same on the creative side, I'm seeing them do all kinds of things I've never seen in the past. But how does someone break out of that mold? Because I think a lot of these young people that get into advertising aren't getting into advertising to do CMS updates unless they're a coder. How can they make themselves stand out when they're so busy working, 8 to 7? How do they stand out and do what they truly want to do, what they set in this industry, what they set out to do, when they're being evaluated by their bosses on, how much they get done in a day? But that's not really how you grow and how you become a leader. So how do you stand out in what you truly want to do?
Are you talking about creative?
It can be anything.
Okay.
Account,
Okay.
creative, doesn't matter.
I'll speak on creative. I think the best thing going for a junior is other people's validation. So entering competitions and award shows, and a lot of times I have a friend specifically. She was complaining about the same thing. I was telling her, you need to make a name for yourself so the people within your company can see what everyone else sees. So as soon as she started doing that, she started getting better briefs, and she's like, "Oh my God!" Like they were placing in carte blanche in Canada Can competition. I don't know what it's called. National Advertising Awards. They're joining one show and getting shortlisted for that, and it got the attention of their own creative directors, where they're like, "Oh my God, maybe I should really start paying attention to this really talented team." So I think it's really up to the initiative of the team that it goes back to how bad do you want it, and if you're content with it and with what you're doing and you want to do other stuff, that's fine. But for me, the most work I put in was like 1 through 7 years. I was trying to build my reputation of being a hard worker, trying to take every brief and make it into something. Here's what the client asked for, but here's something else that we think we should be doing. And those things go a long way with your creative directors of how much more you're just thinking about what these projects could be rather than what they're fed to you as.
Yeah. I think it's easier for creatives because they have all these opportunities to enter shows, do this stuff. But when I hear that, oh, I'm too busy, I can't do this, and I'm working all the time, I go, oh, fuck off. Like, seriously, like we've had people at John Street and myself, I worked all the fucking time and I found extra projects. You have to create your own success. There's no way the company's going to create your own success. So if you're an account person and a strategist and I'm working so hard I can't do anything else, well then get the fuck out of there or find some opportunity. Like I had a team at my agency that I kid you not was probably working 24 hours a day. This team, and they were from Virginia. It was interesting. They went from the Virginia Ad School. And they came wandering into Angus and I's office and they heard that Raptors was up for review 10 years ago. And they said, I know we're working all the fucking time, but if Raptors comes in, we'll find time. So, we used to call it this thing, the GUR at John Street, which is this entrepreneurial. I'm gonna do stuff. I'm gonna create my own success. I'm gonna surround myself with people that are gonna help me get there. And then I find this interesting when you talk about account and strategists. So if there's a creative team that wants to do something outside, and sometimes it's a cause. It's not even an ad. It's like, I feel bad about this thing. I want to talk about it. They go and grab the account person and say, would you help me with this? And the strategist, can you help me sort of figure out the argument to help sell the client? And all of a sudden those people are all working together, and I don't know when they fucking find the time, and it gets made. And then everybody in the agency goes, who worked on that? So.
Yeah, that's...
Also, as a creative, I said it before, like, by the time you're 40, it's so sad. This is what I held up to myself, of that you have to do, by the time you're 40, you're either like in management, or I've known so many people who just switch careers. Because there's, again, back to the return on investment, if you're just a person who's just there and just happy to be there, they're gonna be like, okay, well, or we could bring in 4 juniors for that same thing.
That's
so,
fair.
yeah, so that's what drove me, the fear of being canned. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, I gotta be.
Fear is a great motivator.
I held myself on this insane thing where when I was in school, I was reading a word show bio. So I was like, oh man, that's an awesome one. Oh, that's a great one. What would mine be? And I wrote it, and as it was at that moment, and it was the lamest one. And then I wrote one that what I hoped my bio would be. And then I started to make career decisions based on that. Of like, if somebody wanted to hire me, what is this job going to get me for my next job? Rather than, hey, that's kind of cool, I'll go there. Oh, they want to hire me. All right, that sounds cool. But yeah, it's like really, really be career focused, because like it gets truncated really fast.
I was wondering to hear from someone like Rob, in terms of coming from that account services background. What are ways that aspiring account people, can get noticed within their agency?
Yeah, for sure. I think having done this for a few years now, and then this comment came up, as an account person, you have to become indispensable to your client. You have to become a trusted confidant. You have to be there at their side, in the trenches with them, and become trusted at the end of the day. Clients stay with agencies long term, a lot to do with creative for sure. But you also see a lot based on relationships, and just having the understanding and the confidence that someone has your back. And I've worked with really awesome account people, and I've worked with really, really shitty account people. And a lot of the times, the shitty account person is the way you lose a piece of business. So that would be one. And I think the other piece, from an account person's perspective, especially in a market like Calgary, you have to be strategic. You can't just be the person that takes the project and takes it from start to finish. That's a project manager. That's not a good account person. So it's getting to know your client's business intimately, maybe not intimately, but as well or better than they do. And a lot of that's on spending time on your own, right? Doing a lot of your own research, but don't lean and rely on the strategy guy or girl or the planner to break that insight and break that nugget. Because as an account person, you should know their business best out of anybody in the agency, and that's how I think you get noticed and elevate yourself.
That's great. Let's take another question. Anybody else? Oh, there's a question. Could you introduce yourself and where you work or study?
Sure. Hi, my name is Kaylin. I'm an interior designer at McKinley Burkhart. My question is from a kind of broader creative sense, in that there's so much content out there and there's so much visual input. How do you kind of streamline everything that you're seeing and where you turn to for creative and cultural inspiration?
So where do we find our inspiration?
Yeah, I guess so. And how do you filter through kind of the clutter of the internet and Instagram, and when you're looking for the best of the best and you're looking for a new idea, how do you kind of filter through that?
I can go ahead.
It's just so much.
When I was younger, well, they don't do this anymore, but I used to watch the MTV Movie Awards, and they would have all these inside jokes about whatever happened on pop culture that year with movies or anything. They'd have Ben Stiller doing spoofs, all this stuff. And I would mark down on a sheet all the things that I didn't get. and I knew if I had more than 5, it was a bad year. So my goal was to be able to watch that and understand every single thing.
Such a nerd.
No, but now it's Reddit. It's like, if I don't know what's going on Reddit, if I don't know, hey, do you like bread? Do you like being choked? That kind of stuff. No, nobody? No one? No one? All right. Anyway, so I'm on Reddit like nonstop. I'm just checking, because Reddit's basically, if it comes there first, then it goes onto Facebook and Instagram and everything else. That's my filter basically. And then I've started now. I think the tides are changing again with esports. Right now it's like, oh, esports, or they just sponsor esports. That's what it is in its basic form. But with Ninja being the very first e-gamer on ESPN magazine on the cover, like, it's now finally caught up to Korea of what's going on. So it's like, well, what are we going to do with that? And when I was in LA, we were already sponsoring esports teams. The Memphis shooting, the guy got beat and he just lost his mind and wanted to shoot the guy in that esports Madden tournament. That there's so much more money and so much more avenues for where creative and brands are going, that trying to figure out how to do that first and do it best is, I think, really interesting. So my ear is to the ground of like, what's happening next, what's going to happen, what are kids into. Like, I talk to my nephews all the time, like, what apps do you use? What's your thought on Fortnite now? Like, what's PUBG in that? PUBG? Anyone know it? PUBG destroys Fortnite anyways, by the way. But yeah, literally, I'm just constantly asking people, just picking their brain, what's relevant to them, just so I can kind of immerse myself with the next thing that's happening.
I guess I've always followed sort of heroes when I was even a kid. A comic book kid. I followed comics I loved, and then the comic artist, and then those guys, and then that would be sort of a pathway. And then as I got older and got into design, I would follow my heroes in design, Neville Brody and David Carson, and these designers that were doing incredible typography. And then they followed people, and then I would follow who they follow. And it's interesting that I still think I could do that. It's hard to keep up with everything. Like, I think impossible. And I don't know if I have to in a way because of my role at the school, but the kids are also coming to me. They're showing me shit like, holy fuck, where'd you find that? And that's good. But then on my own everybody's got personal taste. And yes, do you want to broaden that taste, or do you just stay in that world of what you like? And then follow, I find, and maybe I'm not as progressive as Raul. Definitely not. But I'll get on Instagram, and I will follow artists. And then who do they follow? And then I look, maybe, I go down 3 or 4 thumb swipes. And if I love it, then I follow these people. And then it just stays kind of there.
And by the way, just add to it, if you're an account person, you have to be as into it as they are. Because where you get bonded with your partners is you can talk about design or an artist. They don't expect you to know the depth, like you don't expect them to talk Stephen Porter 4 channels of marketing, right? They're from the Harvard Business School. But there has to be a meeting of the minds in terms of understanding. A lot of it's pop culture. So as well, especially, you got to keep in mind, I'll bring a little strategy to it. You got to understand who the target is, right? Because they're broad in understanding. That's their job, is to understand everything and anything. But then it's your role to apply who you're building the house for and who you're designing it for. Because you may love that style, but they may not. Back to what's right for you may totally be wrong for that issue or that time. Because at the end of the day, especially in what we do, we're selling to people. And so there's the brand, there's the competition, then there's people. It's the triad, right? It's no matter what you do, it is a freaking triad. There's the user, your competitor, and what you're about. And you can't do anything without having all 3 of those in mind.
And for strategy, is fascinating, because strategy will probably open your mind. And I'm not sure if you'll have that opportunity with what you do, but I found when I was working in the industry, we were working on the Bay early on. I'm not a fashion, I don't know. And fashion is a unique, unbelievably unique skill. And we would have fashion people come in, stylists would come in, all these people, and then they would inform the strategists, and all of a sudden all these art directors and copywriters and even the cool account account people are like, yeah, I know fashion, and they're like, we fucking don't know fashion. So, and that's maybe the thing that where Raul's again ahead of me, is he's always looking further versus I'm sort of staying in my world. But I think that's where strategy is interesting. Like, how can you just go, I'm willing to look at stuff or step into places that are uncomfortable.
All right, we got time for one more question. Let's see. Oh, maybe, yeah, okay. Yeah, how about yourself?
Take them all.
Introduce yourself and where you study, where you work.
Hey, I'm Grant. I study at ACAD in advertising. As a student right now, aspiring to maybe one day long-term be a creative director, what would you say is the best avenue to get there? Are you focusing on graphic design now? Is it art direction? Is it UX design? What's kind of the step between the portfolio?
Why do you want to be a creative director?
I think right now, I personally love the ideas, I love the concepts, maybe more than just the production. And that's what I love. I think like being able to work with people and see how they can shape an idea, and then they can create how it looks and whatnot. That's the exciting part. So that's what I think creative direction is, but what do I know?
No, I mean, why I asked that question is there's a lot of creative direction is kind of like management or leading, and sometimes some of the best people in this industry are not creative directors. They're makers. They still want to stay an associate creative director, and I want to be a writer. I want to be an art director. I want to make the stuff. I don't want to be a manager. And interesting about the U.S. versus Canada, there's a lot of people like that down there, where they're making the same salary as a creative director, but they're still writing and creating because they just want to do that. So that's why I asked the question. I mean, Raul will have a different point of view on the journey, but I mean, you're in the school. You're gonna have to get it. You're gonna have to build a portfolio. You're gonna have to be proud of that portfolio. Don't show work that you're not proud of. Don't get into that world of I made this, so I should show it to you, even though it might be shitty. Only show work you're proud of. Don't show a ton of work either. Like if you show amazing work and it's only 6 or 7 pieces, and and a creative director wants to see more, that's probably a good thing. Versus showing so much. And this is a portfolio coaching moment, you will get judged by the worst piece in your book. The worst piece, you have like, fuck, this is amazing, and this is amazing, this is amazing, all of a sudden there's this thing that's not so good. Then the person goes, why is that in the book? And then that's where you're getting judged against. So again, and then show as many people as you can, go for as many interviews as you can. If you hear the same things over and over, make the changes. There's a lot of portfolio advice. But you're lucky that you're doing what you love. And I would a little extra coaching to anybody that's ever in the creative world, copywriter, art director, even an account or strategy is put your personality into your work. Because sometimes you're not there beside it. You're not beside the website, or it used to be the portfolio. And I think creative, a president of a company that wants to hire a creative director or the creative director that wants to hire the group creative director wants to be able to look at that book and go, oh, I want to meet this person. There's something about it. The ads are good or whatever, but there's just something else. Because that will separate you from everybody else.
Yeah, so...
I'd just say that if you want to be a creative director, a lot of it comes from your track record as a creative. So that people want to be able to trust your vision because your vision is right. And you have this industry decided that you're good at what you do. That, like Steve said, maybe you don't want to be a creative director later on, but you've developed your reputation in this. But if you do want to be a creative director, your reputation precedes you, and you'll find out very quickly that this industry is very cutthroat. Well, they're like, why is this guy a CD? What has this guy done? And you're getting a company to buy in on your tastes and your vision for the place, for the vision for the work. And if there's no credibility behind it, it's hard to manage a department that doesn't believe in you. So you have to go the creative route.
Don't rush to be a creative director.
Yeah.
There's a question up here. Sorry, some other hands. Yeah, let's take this one.
My name is Luke. I work for Native Way right now, but this is more of a strategy question. when it comes to algorithms and dealing with content creators jumping to different platforms and having following them, I guess, what are some things that you can kind of anticipate coming down the pipeline? Because I see a lot of people moving from like YouTube to Twitch because like the live stream or the way that the feed works and how content can get hidden. You can have great content, but it can get lost in the way that things kind of come out. So how do you mitigate that, or how do you plan for that, especially with how things are changing so quickly with algorithms these days?
Do you care more about the content or the platform when you say create content?
I think it really depends on what platform though.
What's your passion, the platform or the actual content?
The content, for sure.
So, the platforms are going to change so fast. You know, it's what we're talking today will be gone tomorrow. So, I'd focus on being just creating great content. Because if you got the right idea, that you'll make it work, or your partners will make it work on whatever the platform is. That's my point of view on when you're deciding what. Because if you want to be a platform guy, then you're now into understanding. You're going to live in the whole data world and coding world and things like that. So that's my take on it. Understand what you want to be, because some people could do both. But I think if you're young and going for it, you might have the luxury to do both. But if you got a passion, my experience is people that are passionate about ideas aren't necessarily also the same people that are passionate about the data and the back end system. Now, that can change. It's hard to be amazing at both.
The robots are excited.
I saw a hand back there. Make time for one more question. Don't be shy, whoever it was. All right. Guys, help me out.
Another
Pass
wax
this microphone.
plant.
Is that a wax plant?
I'm curious about, I'm Justin, I work at Flip Advertising. At what point in your career did you realize you needed to up your skills? And what made you realize that? And what avenues did you go to do that? Would you rely on people? Did you rely on channels? Maybe you can help me out with that one.
What do you do in Flip?
I'm a digital strategist.
You want a strategy answer or like anything answer?
Me personally, I benefit from a strategy answer.
Zip.
Do you follow strategists and mentors? Are there people out there or companies that are doing interesting things that you reach out to them? Like email the person. Say, can I, and if if you're traveling to a city or that person exists, maybe have a coffee with that person. Like I think, I wish sometimes I could have met some of those creative mentors that I've always admired and just had a coffee. Because when you meet them at an award show, they're just like everybody else. And they want to help. And maybe they're working in a space that you haven't been yet. So you could say, hi, I'm this guy and I'm doing these things. I've admired the work you've done. How did you get there? And they'll probably love to share what they've done. And it's a bit more personal than just reading books and going to conferences.
LinkedIn message. Everyone loves fan mail. And they'll go, oh my God, this person liked this thing that I didn't even really think too much about, and they want to ask me more on it, and they'll like, that's my noise of typing on the computer.
Sound like Trump.
I think, first off, having the self-awareness to say, I need to get better in this one particular area is really important, and then just find people that are really, really good in that one particular area. Demonstrate that you share the same passion as they do, and they will open right up and spend as much time as you possibly want talking about that particular subject or what they do. That'd be my 2 cents. But we have to be learning and keep learning. And my experience hasn't been through courses or going back to school. Those are great options as well. But it's just surrounding yourself with really smart people and seeking them out and actually asking those questions and taking them out for lunch or buying them a beer. That is what's been helpful for me in terms of just better understanding things that I'm not necessarily comfortable with or that are way outside of my comfort zone.
Just adding to all the great comments up here is, there is a line, it's up to you in the business, no matter what it is, to keep educating yourself. When you're done, was it OCAT or whatever, ECAT or whatever school it is, There's this feeling, okay, I got my degree, I'm done. I don't have to learn anymore. I'm just going to go plug my ass and work real hard, you know, and put in all the hours. But no, it's on you to continue to learn the latest technology. It's even more important now. When I came out, like, technology wasn't moving as fast. But for me to stay in the game, I have to continually be challenging myself on the latest in digital, the latest in social, so I can push back at my media companies. And I'm like more than 30. So you have to be able to stay on top of it to stay in the game. And at most of your ages here, and I work with a couple of guys that are my age as well that lead our insights group and all that, and this guy does not stop learning. He's signed up for so many courses and goes to everybody that speaks, and he could lead these courses. And he continually reminds us at Servus that why do we think our staff should just stop learning? So if you need to get to the next level, then you have to figure it out, study it, read that book, talk to mentors, because you just can't finish your degree or whatever it is and go, oh, I got this for life. Doctors don't. Dentists might, but I'm kidding. Hopefully your doctor continues to learn the latest technology about how to open you up without putting a scar this big, and they can do it this big. You're in the same boat. Just go, okay, I graduated account management school and this is how you do it, and I don't have to learn anything else. No. I don't want you on my team if that's what it is, and I don't think these guys will want you on your team or anybody else. So the continual learning or continuing education, you don't have to go and get it from SAIT or wherever it is or U of C. It's got to be here. You have to do it. You have to, you know, just every day, and it's a drag, but I mean, I continually are getting, I know so much about the latest of Facebook and social media and the gardens, walled gardens and latest technology, who's getting sued and who's not, and penetrations and Bitcoin, robots and blah. I go friggin' crazy. I got other things to do in my life at my age. But I have to continue to stay this way to keep growing. To be able to sit here and talk and have a conversation with these guys or my team here or anybody else trying to take my job, right? So just don't stop learning. Find a book. I know the books are boring for half of us, but find a YouTube, whatever it is the hell you want. Find a Reddit link, find anything, but challenge yourself to learn something new this week, because next week it'll totally change. Anybody who tells you they understand social media, I think is full of shit.
So your team was the team taking notes?
Yeah, they're
well
always learning.
played.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point to end on, Don. Never stop learning. You know, I think if there's anything you can take away from this talk is to continually keep improving, and I really believe that really is the key to future-proofing your career. So I'd like to wrap things up by thanking each and every one on the panel. You guys came from Toronto, from Edmonton, from maybe down the street. And you know, I was super inspired, and I'm sure everyone in this room was. You know, I got so into the conversation that, you know, I forgot there's like 2 feet of snow outside. So thank you so much for donating your time and being here with us today.
We're donating.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.